Alright guys, Tactical here, back again. Today I want to talk about the CoD Champs pool play system, because currently the format I don't think is very good, and as a disclaimer, I'm not an OpTic fan. I'm not doing this because OpTic got messed over by it this time, having to red reserve last year, and I just think the system is bad. The fact that OpTic can lose one single series to what went on to be the champions of the tournament, and they go out of the tournament at top 24, I don't think it's a very good system. So I want to go through what I think the flaws with the system are, and some of my proposed solutions, some solutions that I don't think are very good, and then some other complete overhauls of the system, which I think would do a much better job. Let's not forget, this is our crown jewel in the Call of Duty year. It's the best event of the season, and the fact that we're having situations where I think teams that are the best 16 teams at the event are going out in pool play because of effectively bad systems. So, let's start with what the pool play system should do. Now, first of all, I just want to say that the overall format I think is good. 32 teams, 16 from the Pro League, and then 16 kind of challenger teams. I think having 32 teams is great. It keeps it a world championship. The more you restrict the 32 teams, the less of the Spanish, the French, South Americans you're going to even possibly have at the tournament. So I like it as it is. I love the 16 team double elim bracket. I think that's something we can do in esports, especially Call of Duty, which really adds something to the event. So I love all that stuff. My problem is with the first rounds. Currently it's a single round robin pool play. There's definitely alternatives to that, but the first round is where the real problems lie. Now I just want to say, the pool play system, the goal of it, the first round, should be to get the best 16 performing teams at that event into the double elimination bracket. Get them in there and have them seeded in their performance to some degree. That should be the goal. Obviously, entertainment is also a goal, and I've heard some people say that this single round robin group stage can be entertaining because, you know, e.g. they needed one map against, or they needed all three maps against OpTic to qualify. OpTic only needed one map to qualify. Very entertaining. But at the same time, you have very unentertaining matches where a team like Brash is playing Tainted Minds, where both teams are already eliminated. So what I want to start with is something pretty trivial, because people might be watching this. The big overhauls might be too much for MLG. I just want to advise a small tweak that I would make, which if there's only one small thing that changes, maybe this could be it, and then the more substantial, much better changes will come just after this. So first of all, I want to say that a single upset in pools can destroy the entire bracket in the current system. So you see how Lightning Pandas beat TK right here, and that set up a TK versus Rise first round matchup. Also, E United got beaten by Team Sween, setting up their matchup against Red in the very first round. Now, the problem with this situation is that the upsets are very common, in part because teams like TK and Rise Nation, the teams they're playing against can prepare so much for them because they have all the footage in the world. Whereas TK, how much can they prepare for Lightning Pans and Heretics? They can't really, because the only footage they really have of them is from the LCQ, and it's like 2 matches against not very good teams. LP has all of Team Caliber's VODs from their stage 2 run, from previous tournaments, stuff like that. So early on in the tournaments, you often get situations where underdog teams get victories that they wouldn't normally be getting and wouldn't get later on in the tournament. You see it with Team Sween, how they had a really good result early on, and then they go against Ghost and they play FaZe or whoever, and they just get blown out the park because their early matches had, you know, the teams they play later had the opportunity to look at these early matches and adapt to those VODs, whereas E United and Splice didn't have that same luxury. So you get these early rounds upsets quite often, and that can really affect how these pool plays work out. One of the things it affects is the first round bracket, as I said, TK playing Rise, Red playing E United. And this is a big problem, the fact that TK were your grand finalists, and they ended up playing against Rise Nation, who dropped down to losers almost immediately. And I think I think Rise Nation was a lot better team than their top 16 placing, but in part the reason why they placed there was because they had such a hard first round matchup against a team they don't match up very well against. So this is my proposed solution. The current solution involves having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seeded like this, and then it's a reverse snake back from the top 16 teams through. So if you're the number 1 seed, you get the benefit of playing the top 16 team, and then, assuming everything goes to plan, you then play another top 16 team the first round. However, things often don't go to plan, as we've seen here. And we also saw it in 2016 with Complexity upsetting OpTic Gaming, and then they play Envy in the very first round. These upsets happen a lot in groups. My solution would be to seed the pools differently, so you have 1, 5, 2, 6, 3, 7, 4, 8 going as a snake. So effectively you just move around the position of 5 up to there, and then 2 goes there, and it goes on and on. Now what this does is, to some degree, it harms the best teams, because number 1 seed is now playing 15th through 16th, and if they win they're playing the top 12th team, whereas a team like the 6th team can play 11th through 12th and then 15th, 16th. So there's no advantage there for the number 1 seed, but there is the advantage of, if an upset does occur, they don't get a ridiculously hard first round match. So I think this is a good way to go about it. This is better doing it this way than putting the 8th seed here, because if you put 8 here and then 7 here, then you end up getting 4 playing 5, which means that there can be an upset and you still get two very closely matched teams playing each other. But something different to this system I think would be better, because currently upsets cause a very stacked bracket and I don't like it at all. So let's move on to some actual real problems, not something very trivial like that. So, one of the big problems is that you can lose a single match and go out of the tournament. As I already explained, there are situations where their upsets are more common at the start of the tournament than they would be at the end, because of the lack of preparation the top teams can do against the not so good teams, put it that way. Now maybe there's ways the top teams should be able to adapt to this, but at the end of the day it is something of an advantage for the lower tier teams to have this depth of knowledge over the top tier ones. You can go out with 1 loss. Let's have a look at last year, 2017. Red Reserve, they lose a series to ALG 3-1, which was Spoofs, Nova, those guys. They lose 1 series to them, but they beat FaZe and they beat Era Eternity, and because of the map count situation, they lose on head-to-head map count and go out with a single loss. They got upset by Allegiance, they went out. At the same time, some people might say, okay, well you shouldn't have lost to Allegiance. This time with OpTic Gaming situation, there really is not many excuses. They lost 3-0 to Evil Geniuses, okay, but EG won the tournament. They were the best team in the entire tournament. That's the only team that OpTic lost to, but they go out on map count because Elevate did slightly better versus the other teams. Even they got 3-1'd by OpTic, but because EG 3-0'd OpTic, then it cancels each other out. And OpTic go out after only 1 loss, which I think is pretty ridiculous, because once you get into bracket play, we accept that we should allow teams to lose twice before they go out of the tournament. But in group play, you can lose once and go out. It seems very strange to me, especially because, as I say, there's a higher propensity for upsets in groups, like Elevate beating Evil Geniuses, say. So that's definitely a problem. Another problem is that you can get the situation where there's a team that goes 1-2 in groups and makes it out. Okay, so here it is. You have a 1-2 team, they make it out of pools. So potentially, Team Infused tier go 1-2, then they don't win a map for the rest of the tournament. They go 1-4, but yet they place top 16, and another team who went 2-1, such as Red or OpTic in this year's, goes 2-1, but places worse than them. So I don't think that's a very good system at all. Then we have a situation where there's a lot of meaningless matches. I talked about earlier with the Rise group, with the Brash versus Tainted Minds match, completely meaningless. There's no point in even having it, apart from, as I say, pocket change. But really all we want to determine is the best 16 teams in the event. Also, it brings up the possibility to throw matches to get a better matchup in your first round. So for example, Rise went Game 5 with Lethal Gaming. If they'd have decided to throw and lose to Lethal, they would have played Lightning Panda's first round, a much easier matchup than Team Caliber. And even if you decide to make the groups play at the same time, because of the situation where 2 teams can go 2-0 and some can go 0-2 after the first day, it's impossible to prevent a situation where it is possible that a team will know that if they lose, then they will get a better round 1 matchup. You don't want a situation like that. You want teams to always be going for the victory. Another situation, which is I think is the big one, is that the tiebreaker systems are very bad. In Ghosts, they had a slightly better tiebreaker system, where if you see here in Group E, 3 teams go 2-1. The tiebreakers to get out were just a best of 1 S&Ds, and they did this regardless. I'm pretty sure it was regardless of what the head-to-head map counts are. Whereas nowadays they do it off the map count, and if the map count is the same as you could see in Group C in 2017, if the map count is all the same at 4 and 7 here, then they still play it. But otherwise, if the map count between the head-to-head teams is not the same, they do it simply off map count. Which I really don't like the idea of basing things off map count. I think they should do it solely off victories. You either win or you lose. If you want to take it into map count and not base it completely off wins, then why would you not take it one level lower? Because you can win a series 3-2, but you can win the first map 250-50, the second map 6-0, then you can lose an overtime CTF, you can lose 250-249, and then you can 6-0 the last S&D. So you've dominated the series, you've won 3 really convincing maps, you've lost 2 very close maps. People will look back on the series and say, well, you know, you really did blow them out most of the time. They just were competitive and they got lucky to some extent in how they won. But that still comes up on the scoreboard as a 3-2. Why would you not take it one level further and say, well, none of the maps were close, have some sort of metric to work out who actually was the better team overall? But no, you don't do that. They base it off map count, which is very random and fluky. I don't like it at all. And I very much think the system should be based purely off winning. You win, you go through, you lose, you don't. Just how it is in the bracket play. I don't think map count really has a place in such an important seeding at the most important event of the year, of course. So that's the problems with the round robin play. I want to address a couple of the suggested solutions. One of them involves a losers bracket. Some people say we should have the 3rd place team go into losers. Now, while this is a possibility and it seems okay in theory, if we go back to 2017, let's have a position like this where we have 3 teams tied at 1 and 2. The first team would go through to winners, the second team will go through to winners off some mysterious tiebreak or whatever they're going to do. Here it was the best of 1 S&Ds, but it could easily be map count. Then the 3rd team, also 1 and 2, would go into losers, and then the 4th team would go home. Like, I don't like that at all. I think you have to it makes it even worse. The problem's already worse than it already is, to be honest. So I think the only real solution in a situation like this is to either say, well, only 2 teams get through, or you say all teams go down to losers bracket. Because otherwise you have horrible tiebreaker situations like this that remain, where 1 team will go home and 1 team goes to losers. You just have to let them all go. But then, if you let them all go, then you get teams that are 0-3, making losers, and then, like, you know, if you don't win a match in pool play, I don't think you deserve to be going anywhere. So, and also it would make scheduling more of a challenge. You'd have to probably have a Charlie station at the proper arena if you're going to continue the losers bracket from there. So, you know, it becomes more of an issue in more ways than one. I much prefer a method in which we could just have the best 16 teams get out of the first round, and this stuff wouldn't be necessary. Dropping someone down into losers bracket at top 24, you know, it's very unlikely they're going to do any damage. I'd much prefer them to have a fairer way to prove that they're one of the top 16 teams at the event, rather than saying, oh, well, you know, you got unlucky on the map count situation like a red reserve, and then put them in losers for an impossible run, which is very demoralizing. So I don't like anything like that. One suggestion would be to do more pools, so maybe you do 8 pools of 4 or 4 pools of 8 rather than 8 pools of 4. The problem is that with that is you have way more matches. So you'd actually have 112 matches, I worked out, if you had 4 pools of 8 rather than only 48 matches at 8 pools of 4, which would be impossible to schedule. So let's go on to some alternative methods. Now there's a couple alternative methods I'll explore. The first one is the GSL system, the Global StarCraft League system. Now I want to refer to a great post by Redleaf7 on the Reddit. I'll link this down in the description. This is effectively what Looney is advocating for in this tweet. Winners play each other, winner of that makes it out 1 seed, then the losers of the initial matches play it, winner then plays the loser of the initial matches. That way it doesn't come to tiebreakers but just comes down to winning. Now this is the GSL format, which I very much like, as Redleaf explains here, similar to what I was talking about. There's also a great article on HLTV that talks about it. Let me just scroll up a little bit past the last section, which I'll get to in a second. This is what the GSL format looks like. You would still have 8 groups of 4 teams, but instead of playing a round robin, the number 1 seed plays the number 4 seed, the number 2 seed plays the number 3 seed, and then the winners of the 2 matches play each other to make it out the pools. Then the losers play each other, and then they play the loser of the decider match to make it out. So this is a much better system, I think, because it means there's no tiebreakers involved. It's just you win, you're in, you lose, you're out. If you win 2 before you lose 2, you're in. If you lose 2 before you win 2, you're out. Very simple, no tiebreakers. Nothing sketchy, no awful ways to lose and go out of a tournament. Also, there's no meaningless matches. Every match here is important. There's only 5 matches here rather than 6 in a normal pool, so it actually makes it easier on the scheduling side of things. But there is a problem in that it's possible to just be better than 1 team and advance. So we see in Redleaf's supposed bracket, OpTic beats Supremacy, EG lose to Elevate just as they did in the groups. OpTic then beat Elevate just as they did. OpTic would come out number 1 seed in this scenario. Then EG would beat Supremacy as they did. Then you would have a matchup between Elevate and EG. I'm not sure why he's decided this is NA, but regardless, these 2 teams would play to qualify. And if Elevate was to beat EG here, as they did initially, Elevate would have lost to OpTic. They would have beat EG twice. They'd only have to be better than 1 team to qualify. We don't know whether they're better than Supremacy. We can surmise that they are, and obviously they did 3-0 them in actuality, but Elevate would only have to beat 1 team twice to get through. So that's a slight flaw, but I don't think it's that bad, and I think it's a lot better than what we have currently. Now, there is another option here, which this HLTV article explores, which is that you could do 4 groups of 8 teams, and this would mean that you do basically a double elimination bracket, which goes a bit further than what this would. And effectively, this would mean that there's a couple of ways you could do this. You can either have the best 4 teams advance out of the 8, and then the problem is the final matches of your pool play would not be determining who goes through and who doesn't. They would be determining the seeds, which, you know, it might not be good from a spectator perspective. Now, the other potential system is the Swiss. I think the GSL format is probably the easiest to introduce and would not be a problem in scheduling, but I want to discuss the Swiss format, as I think that if we're really going for the best possible format in terms of fairness and in terms of how enjoyable it is to watch, then the Swiss format is, to me, it tops the list. So if you're not aware of what the Swiss format is, effectively there's no pools. Every team can face any other team. So the way it works is, now, traditionally, the way the format would work, as Redleaf nicely explains, these are just randomized matchups. In the first round, every team is 0-0, and one way to do it is to randomize all the matches, and every team, they will just play whoever they match up against. After the first round, whoever wins, the winning team goes into the 1-0 bracket, the losing team goes down to the 0-1 bracket, and then they keep randomizing the matches to play each other until once you get 3 wins, you're in. Once you get 3 losses, you're out. So I think this is a great system already, before you add on some other complexities which make it even better. But in this system that Redleaf is proposing, or well, what he's describing here, it's really fair in the sense that you have to lose 3 matches to go out, and to 3 different opponents. That's a crucial thing about Swiss. It's randomized, but you cannot play a team you've played before. So you have to lose 3 matches to 3 different teams, and then you go out, which I think is very fair. However, you do have circumstances where, because it's randomized, you can get very hard runs and very easy runs. So, for example, in the first round, Team Caliber could be drawn against Rise, and Red Reserve could be drawn against D United. And if that happens, the loser of both those matches would go down to the 0-1, and it's possible that they would play, and then one of your top 4 seeds is now 0-2 on the verge of elimination. That's a possibility. But overall, if you lose 3 matches to 3 different teams, maybe that's a fair outcome. Also, the randomization of the matches means that there are always exciting ones. It means that you'll always have 2 high-tier teams facing off, and you'll also have lower-tier teams facing off. And in the second round, you'll quite often have a lower-tier team, like 2 lower-tier teams will be facing off against each other. And there's like 2 of those, and then they'll get matched up in the second round, and then you'll have an underdog team at 2-0 about to advance, and then, you know, they'll play a top tier team, they'll lose, and then you have like these underdog stories going on. So I think it's overall kind of a good system already. However, there are, as I say, problems with randomization. I don't just want to stop at a good system. This is the biggest tournament in our whole esport. We want the perfect system. So what HLTV talk about, which is a really cool idea, is they talk about the perfect format. And so the way this works with Buckles reseeding, in the very first round, the matchups are determined by predetermined seedings. So the best team, Team Caliber, they would play one of the very lowest seeds, because the way they qualify through the LCQ, so you have the 25th through 32nd seed and the 17th through 25th. So TK would play one of those randomized teams, and then going down, all the teams 1 through 8 would play one of the lower tier teams, and then the the 9th through 16th teams would play 17th through 27th or 24th even. The problem with that is, to some extent, you'd probably have a lot of boring matches that would be easily predictable. But then again, TK versus Lightning Pandas, they were a 17th through 24th seed, and they upset Team Caliber. So that's not to say that it wouldn't be exciting. Now, the second round, I think you can just randomize. The third round is where the Buckholes seeding comes in. This is a really cool idea. I think it comes from chess to some extent. I'm not 100% sure. Effectively, it reseeds you depending on how hard your run has been. So for example, FaZe here, in the first round they play Tai Lu, and then they go to 1-0, Tai Lu go to 0-1, and then FaZe play Cloud9, and they move to 2-0. Now this number here, 2-2, this represents the combined records of the teams that you played. So FaZe played Tai Lu, who then won their second round matchup, and FaZe played Cloud9 here, who won their first round matchup. So what this means is that FaZe had theoretically a harder run than G2 or Na'Vi, because the teams that G2 or Na'Vi beat in the first round ended up losing, which, you know, implies that they weren't as impressive a win as FaZe's win, because FaZe beat 2 teams that went on to win, you know, that won their games. And you see down here with Renegades, they lost to G2 first of all, and they also lost to Liquid, and they have a 3-1 Buckholz rating because G2 went on to win their next game, and Liquid obviously beat Renegades. So then the seeding works by matching the team with the highest Buckholz with the team with the lower Buckholz. So you don't get a FaZe versus Mouse matchup here, you get a FaZe versus G2 or Na'Vi, even if it was randomly assigned. This goes through the entire tournament, and teams that have already played each other can't play each other again. So Mouse here, they can't play SK, so Mouse end up playing Gambit because they're the opposite end of the Buckholz scale. Mouse have had a very hard run, whereas Gambit have theoretically had an easy run. So that's why they are seeded against each other, and it means that you can't have a very randomly lucky good bracket and then a very difficult bracket at the same time. As you go through the seeding, the bracket, they even themselves out over time. So look, that's a potential system. I think that's the one being used at the Faceit Major as far as I understand, and I personally think it's a very good one, but like, it's very good at determining the best 16 teams at the event. You have to lose 3 series to go out of the tournament. You have to win 3 series to get in. And it's all about winning. There's no stupid tiebreakers or anything like that. And then usually what happens is the 3-0 teams will play the 3-2 teams from the bracket, and then the 3-1 teams will be randomized. Or you could probably base the teams that play each other on what their Bockholz rating is through the tournament. But there are some problems with this, as of course there always will be. Champs is currently a 5-day event. The first 2 days are the first stage, currently pool play. The latter 3 days, as you can see here down at the bottom, day 1 and day 2. Each of these days has 24 matches to determine the better 16 teams. The last 3 days are the bracket play. So currently 24 matches both days is 48 matches total for the pool play. If you did a Swiss system, I worked out it would require 66 matches to be played to do the entirety of the Swiss system. Now, I don't really know feasibly how you fit that into 1 day of play, or into 2 days of play, sorry. Maybe you do 32 matches 1 day, but the problem is that you have to reseed the teams as you have to draw as you go through the tournament. So maybe you play all the first round matches, 16 matches, then you have to redraw who they're going to play against. And one thing it would do is it prevents teams from preparing for their opponent. So for example, if you're a team caliber and you're a very high level team, all of the lower tier teams will have prepared against you, will have looked at your strategies, what you've done to win stage 2 playoffs, etc. So you end up getting randomly drawn against like a Brash or someone like that. You haven't had any opportunity to prepare for them, but because you're a top tier team, you've been heavily prepared against. Usually how it worked at the Star Series CSGO event is that it was best of 3 Swiss systems, and every night they drew the matches so that the teams had the night and then the next morning to prepare. In this system, there's no opportunity for preparation, and it would almost impossible. It would be so difficult to get done in 2 days. You'd have to probably extend champs longer. So, look, I think that's a very unrealistic expectation. I think the Swiss system with the Bockholz is probably the best system for deciding the best 16 teams you're going to get on a fairness front and on an entertainment front for the crowd, because all the matches are meaningful and you get really good underdog stories going through it as well. But I think it's very difficult to achieve on a 5-day schedule we currently have. I think if you wanted to make a brief change to make things slightly better, you could do this change to ensure you don't get mismatches in the very first round. And then if you wanted to make a more drastic but very achievable change, they should definitely consider the GSL format, which I think is significantly better than what we currently have. Still has its flaws, however, but it would mean that you can't just lose 1 match and go out of champs. If you can lose 2 before you go out of bracket play, it doesn't make any sense that you can lose 1 and go out of pool play when, as we've seen, matchups tend to be more random early on in the tournament. So that's what I have to say about that. Let me know what you think about it. There's certainly some different opinions on this, I'm sure. I think MLG need to reconsider the champs format for sure to make it fair. As I say, it's the biggest tournament we have in Call of Duty. We need to make sure it's the best standards. Do you really think that OpTic Gaming were the 17th through 24th best team in the tournament? I don't think so. I just think that the pool play system and the single round robin pool play system prevented them from showing their full potential. So, anyway, that's all I have to say about that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment what you think in the description box below, as always, and I'll see you next time.